Okay, welcome back to Cool Club Podcasts. We have reviewed a bunch of golf clubs this year.
Yeah, we've tested a lot.
So many.
More next year, but
Yeah.
we've tested a lot.
We honed in this year purely on drivers and irons. Some of that was a
Right.
little bit of a manpower thing, and some
Right.
of it was figuring out testing, right?
Yep, it's not an easy thing to do.
But we also have another weapon in our arsenal.
And probably the more important one, right?
Right.
And it's our fitters, right? So what are they thinking, and who are they recommending which clubs to and stuff? Now, keep in mind, they actually do have all the robot data and access to it.
Yes.
So it's not, out of the picture entirely. But really, what's selling, and then what do our fitters really think is good for specific people, right? So.
Yeah. And that's what we tried to do here. It was like, okay, well, let's take the robot data away from it. Like you said, they have access to it in fittings, so they've got the
Right,
the
so it's
awareness.
kind of mingled in there a little bit, yeah.
But it's really, what are they seeing in fittings? What are their gut feelings? What are people enjoying out there?
Right.
And it was just a raw survey, a kind of like quick question, quick answer.
Right.
So I shot it out of there, and we've got fitters all over the US. I even got the guys in Australia involved in this. So it's really a holistic view of what all of our Cool Clubs fitters are actually doing. I asked them to vote on certain categories within drivers, irons, fairways, and hybrids, and that's how we're going to run it. We're going to run the driver one first. I think a lot of people are going to be into that, and then we'll kind of run down the set. So the first category that I put out there was, what do you rate as the best driver under 75 miles an hour? This is a big category of people. Maybe we don't see them all, but it's a huge driver category.
And we actually had a fairly good-sized winner that you would never expect. So
Right.
this is really like a out-of-the-box, not the company you think the wins for the under 75 miles an hour, but it's actually the Titleist TSR1.
TSR1.
Right.
And I mean, I voted for this one personally.
Yeah, I would too, probably.
It's a super lightweight, neutral looking, metal sounding. It's all the
Right.
things that you
Well,
want.
and Titleist is not what we used to think in the past, right? It's not just for high handicaps. Titleist was it was actually our #1 selling iron for a good period of time over the last couple of years. So they've kind of broken out of that mold a bit, particularly when they came out with the drivers, starting with TSR. Or TSI rather, that was probably the best driver of the year all round. I mean, some people, beat it in forgiveness, Ping did, and some distance, TaylorMade did, but it did really well, and the second generation is just as good.
And this highlights its model range. Like you were just saying, TSR1 is like this new thing. It's lightweight, not many
Right.
people do it. It's purely for that low speed, higher spin, higher launch, and then you feed through that line. TSR2 is a great driver
Right,
all
absolutely.
round. TSR3 is a tour
He's
driver.
a really good driver as well. So they have a good line.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't expect to see Titleist in this realm. I will tell you, there are, both Callaway and TaylorMade are coming out with lightweight versions next year as well.
Yes, true.
And this is kind of playing off the whole popularity of Zexio and stuff that's designed to be super light for, lower club head speeds. And that's what it is, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
So the TSR1 got 33% of the vote. That's pretty good.
Right.
I want to mention the second place here because sometimes it might be pretty close between first and second.
Yeah.
In this case, it wasn't as close, but the G430 Max got second
And that
vote.
makes sense, right? That was the most forgiving driver we had tested and stuff. The downside to the Ping stuff in general is they tend to be heavier heads.
Yep.
So if you get someone who's really looking for distance and stuff, that weight is actually what affects it a bit.
And the HL for me this year, I get what Ping did, but when you're moving that lightweight in the back, into the back of the driver, it almost
Right.
kind of defeats the purpose. You want weight low and back in those forgiving drivers, and you're
Right.
actually putting a lighter weight in it. So the way we did it, maybe our fitters didn't get the best use out of it than an entirely light head.
Right, exactly.
So let's drop down into the second category, which is going to be maybe the majority of golfers out there.
Yeah, 75 to 95 is a big range, right?
Huge range.
So that's a lot of different players.
It's a lot to ask of the
and
fitters.
we'll also post some other information. Actually, we track our sales by every 10 miles an hour, so that's another thing we'll throw on. That maybe just throw a little enough of that as well.
Yep.
But that's right.
This one got 50% of the votes in this category, so it's a pretty strong winner.
Yeah, Paradigm Standard driver
Yeah.
killed it this year.
Yeah.
It did really well. It's basically a really good mix of a lot of things. It was good in distance. It was good in forgiveness. I don't think it was the best in any one of those, but it was probably distance here and there. But all around, it was a great driver.
Yeah.
And it was our #1 selling driver all around. That makes sense.
I was going to say, that has to be our best sales. It came out
I'm
the
playing
blocks.
it. I mean, I tried a whole bunch and everything. I mean, I've got a Titleist as well, but
Yeah.
I like both of them.
And basically, Callaway came out strong. They started winning at the beginning of the tour season.
Right.
They got a lot of hype about it. They had this new, the carbon chassis.
Right, whole
It was
paradigm shift.
paradigm
right?
shift.
Yeah.
It was a big
Yeah,
deal.
so it
So
actually did work.
I'm glad that they won this category. It was a great driver. Again, followed by G430 Max in second place again.
Again, more forgiving, bigger head a little bit. It looks bigger anyway.
Yeah.
But great driver as well.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And it was closer, right? It was like 50% of the market versus 33, so still pretty high up.
Yeah.
And you got to keep in mind too that we only listed the drivers that we carry
Yes.
for these fitters. So there's some Strixons and some other really good drivers are out there that are not mentioned in here, just because they're not in our fitting matrix, so it's not a fair test.
Yeah, yeah. This is basically the big four.
Big four.
With Cobra tacked on the end
With
of it
Cobra
as well.
yep.
Yeah. And then when we get into the irons, we are going to have pretty much everything in
Yep.
that mix. Now, getting towards that higher speed, but still capturing that 100-mile-an-hour market, which you think is
Right.
a lot of golfers. This is really the all-rounder, 95 to 110 miles an hour, and I voted for this one too, TSR3.
Yeah, I did too. Actually, that's my other driver, right? So,
Right.
Great driver, has been really good all around. Almost doubled what the Paradigm TD did at that speed, which
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Traditional looking shape and stuff. I mean, really good all around driver. The Titleist was.
Simple. I like the adjustability. We touch on it all
Right.
the time. That and a high-speed driver is great. Rear, left to right adjustability. Great looking shape. Titleist cult following.
Right.
A lot of the fitters. I think it's just a safe place. It's
Oh yeah,
just going to
you
get
can't
a
really
lot.
go wrong with it.
Yeah, stuff going on. And then we go into the second place, which is Paradigm TD.
Yeah, I'm surprised that actually ended up in second on that one.
this
I would
speed.
not have put that in second just
Yeah.
because I think it's just too low spin for the bottom of that speed. For me,
Right.
95 miles an hour, it's probably a little over that. It doesn't spin enough,
Sure.
and it's not super forgiving. But interesting to see it being second in that.
Second vote, yeah. Well, and then it's a simple one at the end here. We got 110 plus miles an hour. These guys are elite speeds. We're talking towards the tour
Right.
end of the speed range, and the roles reverse.
Exactly.
And it starts to make
and
more
that totally
sense.
makes sense, right? So the Paradigm TD one, the high speed one,
Yep.
it's a spin killer.
Yep.
It's good in other things too. It's pretty forgiving, really good ball speeds and stuff, but it's definitely a spin killer, and that was great.
I loved it. I played the TD this year. I also played the Cobra LS. It didn't pop up in 1 or 2 here. Titleist TSR3 in second place. This is probably the closest vote. There's only 11% separating them,
Right.
which is not massive when you think about.
No.
You got Stealth Plus, you got G430 LS Tech
Right,
out
there's some
there.
other ones in there.
They weren't that far behind
No.
the pack. Now the sales is more your end of the deal. I can do the
Yeah,
votes.
right.
You're the sales guy.
Right. Well, obviously, asking the fitters which ones they like the best. Obviously, there's some marketing involved in there, which one they're playing a little bit. But at the end of the day, really, what sells
Yeah.
is really kind of a really solid number. as
This
far
is the
as-
net result of it all. The robot,
Exactly.
the fitter, this is what happened
Yeah,
this year.
exactly. Now the fitters have obviously their opinions, which is what we just went over. They also have all the robot data, and combined, obviously, and the customer's feedback is what sells. So this is a really important number as far as what's selling for what category.
So let's start down at the bottom end of the speed and just work our way through. We've got 65 to 74 miles an hour of club head speed here.
Right.
And you've got the best seller, which is what we both kind of thought might be the best at that speed.
Right.
Ping G430 Max.
Yeah, G430 for X, that makes sense. It's more forgiving, right? A lot of the people at those speeds are not necessarily better golfers. The only downside to that is it's a relatively heavy head, as we mentioned before, and some of the lighter ones give you a little more speed. But it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's a forgiving golf club, and that makes a lot of sense.
Well, thinking out loud, I think that when you get a heavier head in play there is more forgiveness there just anyway,
yeah.
just with that more mass. So the trade-off for gaining a couple of miles an hour of club speed and hitting the golf course more often probably negates itself.
Yeah, exactly.
And you obviously see that's what our fitters are going for here.
Right, but then you see Paradigm and Paradigm X having 20% each,
Yeah.
so that's really the winner in that category to some extent.
Yep.
And then TSR1 popping up as 12%. So, but that's still quite a fair few Titleist at really low speed.
And that's it. I mean, Callaway is the overall winner, I guess, but Ping taking as a singular model.
Single mile
taking
wins
the
in the thing. Yep.
So the next range there, 75 to 84 miles an hour.
Right. Not a lot of difference, really. You tend to get a little better golfers. There's probably a few more senior men in there than there are ladies, a little bit. But they're pretty bunched together as well. G430 Max won, but by a little bit over the Paradigm,
Yep.
Which makes sense.
That
The
is a
standard
really
one.
small margin, actually.
Right. Exactly. Really small margin, a couple
Yeah.
of percentage points. Stealth HD showed up.
Great
which-
driver, I
Why we
thought.
don't sell more HD drivers is beyond me. But to give Stealth some credit, that's a really draw bias driver and does solve a lot of problems for people.
They went to that extreme this year. They had that Stealth HD iron that was that really squat
Right,
low
right.
thing. The fairway woods were super low. I mean, I loved it for that category of player. I
Right.
think it was probably the best design feature out there to really help what's going on.
Yeah, if you're a slicer, it definitely was a lot of help.
And I think that terminology scares a few people off in the fittings. When you say HD or draw bias, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get better. But they really probably should just play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry,
moving down that list.
Swing change is tough. So.
Yeah, exactly right. You're better off just giving yourself a helping hand with the equipment.
Exactly.
That's why we're here.
And actually, Ping did some research a couple of years ago and stuff, and they do all the Arcos stuff on the back of the club. So they tracked all their data from all the clubs they saw with Arcos and stuff, and even the draw bias drivers. I mean, there was still your misses right.
Yeah.
So you can't have too much, left bias for a driver for somebody who slices the ball.
You just needed to name it something else. Just name it something neutral, and people are less freaked out.
Yep.
Getting up to a bigger category here, 85 to 94 miles an hour, and it's still the same winner at this point. It's more forgiveness. It's heavily forgiveness biased.
Right. So Ping still won in that area as well.
Yep.
So Ping was the number one, the G4030 Max again. Paradigm came in again second, almost exactly the same, right? So 20 and 21.
Yep.
Not a lot of difference there.
And there's a shocker. The last one in that list.
TSR2 showed up there, and the Stealth Plus.
The plus of that
at
speed.
that speed, which is, I mean, it's got to be adjustability driving that, you would think.
to be.
Or 85 to 95 miles an hour, you get some people that start spinning it.
I was just thinking
And
about
it's a
that.
low spinner, so maybe that's it.
And the other thing is maybe you be able to get the 12-degree model in that and cranking the loft all the way up.
Right.
2 degrees in that sleeve with the adjustability. Maybe that just helped a few guys out do what they needed to do.
But it's definitely in there.
Yeah. Okay, so now we start moving up, and this is more of the, where we tested the robot at 95 miles an hour, 95 to 104. This is right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, this is right in my warehouse. I'm right in the middle of that, although probably on the bottom end right now. But that's right.
Just get back in the gym. You'll
Exactly.
be fine. We go straight in with what I would expect to be the winner this year anyway, which is that Paradigm. Really great all-round driver.
But right next to it is obviously the G430 Max again.
Yeah.
Followed by the Paradigm TD started kicking in at that point. You get some higher speed where you're starting to have some spin.
Yep.
Not so much between 95 and 104 miles an hour before somebody hits up on it, but if you're hitting down on it heavily,
You get a bit more gear.
then you get more spin, more gear effect, and obviously that makes some sense.
Yeah. TSR2, TSR3. Interesting, the forgiveness of the TSR3 after we did the robot testing. I'm not sure how that plays into the fittings, but I would have started using the TSR3 even more, right? With that forgiveness.
Well, we noticed when both the TSI and the TSR a little bit is the difference between the forgiveness of the TSR3 and the 2 were really not that much.
No.
Almost where it's a tie.
Yeah.
Or it's probably a little different if we did more mapping and stuff, but they're really close. So personally, I like the 3 better. It's a better looking club for one, and it's got more adjustability.
Yeah.
So that does make some sense, actually.
Some of the beginner players with that head shape with the 2 being a little more, low and back, makes it look like you can sweep it. I think that helps. Tour players having that little dumpier shape kind of.
But again,
feel.
they're at 95 to 104. If you actually put the 2 Titleists together, they're 23%. So it's pretty good. They're a great year.
Great drivers.
Yep.
Pushing more into the realms of where people would like to be, but maybe aren't all the time.
Right,
105 to 114. Now we're right in the tour average once we get to the top end of this.
Yeah, this is kind of senior tour average. Probably is 106 or 4 or something like that nowadays. So, but it's still a fair amount of speed. So you are creating more spin at that speed. Paradigm TD won.
TD won. They won by a strong margin.
And it won by a fairly good amount. Right over the TSR3, which is close.
Yep.
A little higher spin, very similar in other characteristics. And the Ping, the G430 LST shows up there.
I think I know why that's down there from a fitter's point of view. Like quality driver, super low spin.
Right.
It's what it felt like
spin.
in the fitting, and the face sat a little open. And it's a Ping look, and I think that the Ping look might scare away a few guys that are actually, better players. Even though it's a quality driver, it's super forgiving. People want to see more neutral at this point in the bag. And then we got the Stealth 2 standard model.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. Although from 105 to 114, that's not super high spin.
No.
And the standard model still is relatively low, so that does make some sense. And it's a really good driver.
Yes. And now very top end, this is dream stuff, 115 plus.
Yeah. Callaway, clear winner here.
Clear winner by a long
There's a low
stretch.
spin driver out there, followed by the LST.
Yep.
Again, another low spin driver. And the TSR3. So, I mean, it's not really that surprising. And then the Stealth Plus, obviously, is in there as well.
Yeah.
And they're all they're all doing pretty well there. Not one's like super better than the other, but that's not surprising at all.
No, and I think that's when the Ping LST starts to come into it. You got a lot more speed.
Right.
So that low spin starts to make a bit more sense. They can get it under control.
And it's fairly right bias as well. So is the Callaway, actually.
Yeah, the Callaway is actually more right biased than I thought. It'd be interesting to see what all of their new stuff comes out like next year, and if these stack up the same. But this will be a reference point for us. We'll do this at the end of next year, and we'll see what drivers and who's shuffling around in that leaderboard.
At the end of the day, on all of this stuff we do, all this testing and stuff, really want to look at what works for what how you swing.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good indicator. If you're one of the top 2 or 3 in here and you're right in the thing, you've probably got the right driver.
Yeah. Well, head to our reviews page on the website. We're going to publish these numbers. We're going to publish some fun podiums of the winners in these categories. You see our reviews individually on the heads. This is all about making it easier for you to go and make a purchase at your local golf store, or come and get a fit in and make a purchase with some actual knowledge behind it rather than some just branding, right?
I mean, all the OEMs do all this robot testing for a reason, right? And I was at Callaway recently. They had the robot set up for John Rahm's swing to dial his stuff in. So it's a great way to kind of narrow down, what fits, what works well for me.
Yeah.
And that's a starting point.
There's plenty of YouTube golfers out there. That's our market right now.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.